A world without heroes. The city of Metropolis, once a beacon of hope, stood under a darkened sky. The streets, filled with the sound of laughter and conversation not so long ago, were now eerily quiet. The bustle of the city's everyday life had been replaced by the haunting silence of disconnection. Clark Kent, Superman, the last son of Krypton, stood high above the city on the edge of a skyscraper, his cape billowing behind him in the wind. His eyes scanned the streets below, but the familiar scenes had begun to feel like a distant memory. Once, Metropolis had been alive with the hum of progress, the laughter of children, the music from street performers. People helped each other, they cared. But now, all that remained were cold, indifferent faces, as though life itself had begun to fade into nothingness. Clark's mind raced, conflicted between his duty and his doubt. Had I failed them? He wondered. What's the point of being the symbol of hope when there's no one left to believe in it? His eyes moved over the streets below, seeing people rush past one another, avoiding eye contact, never offering a smile or a kind word. It was as if they had forgotten how to connect, how to truly care. They were trapped in their own world of isolation, each person alone in a crowd of millions. What happened to the world I once knew? Superman had faced powerful foes before, villains who had tested his strength, his endurance, and his very will to continue. But this was different. This wasn't a battle against a physical enemy. It was a battle against a pervasive apathy that seemed to consume the world around him. He couldn't fight this with his fists, and for the first time, he wasn't sure he could win. Just as he was beginning to sink into his own thoughts, the familiar sound of a news broadcast cut through the air. He turned, looking down toward a nearby television screen where a message was being broadcast. It wasn't a typical news alert or an announcement of some impending disaster. No. This was something far more unsettling. A man, dressed in a dark suit and with a cold, calculating demeanor, appeared on the screen. His sharp features and piercing eyes spoke of a man who was accustomed to controlling every situation. His voice, smooth and measured, reverberated through the city's speakers. "My name is Elion," the man said, "and I am here to save you from yourselves." The words sent a chill down Superman's spine. He had heard many threats before, but this felt different. This wasn't some madman bent on power. This was a man who believed he was offering humanity salvation. As Elion continued to speak, his words seemed to latch onto every corner of the city. People paused what they were doing, their attention drawn to the broadcast, as if compelled by an invisible force. For too long, you've clung to outdated ideas of kindness, compassion, and love. Elion's voice boomed. These things are nothing more than weaknesses that have shackled you, making you vulnerable. Look around you, people. Look at the world you've created. A world full of chaos, confusion, and pain. I offer you a solution, a new path, a chance to evolve. I offer you a world built on logic, order, and efficiency, where emotion has no place. Superman stood frozen in the sky, the words striking deep within him. Elion's message was poison, a message that sought to strip away the very thing that made Superman who he was. Kindness, love, compassion, and hope were all part of his core. They were the very things he fought to protect. And now, here was a man who was offering to rid the world of those virtues entirely. As Elion continued to speak, the streets below became filled with a haunting silence. People's expressions grew blank, as if his words had taken root and suffocated their ability to feel. Superman watched in helpless silence as the city around him shifted. "People will never change," Elion continued, his voice growing darker. "They'll never evolve until they let go of the illusions you've given them. I will give them the truth, logic, reason, and efficiency." Superman's fists clenched as Elion's broadcast ended. The silence that followed was oppressive, like a weight settling over the city. It wasn't long before Superman felt a pulse of energy sweep through the city, a signal, faint but undeniable. Elion's device had activated. In an instant, the effects of his plan were felt across Metropolis. Superman felt a shift in the air, something dark and unnatural. He flew lower, landing in the heart of the city. The streets were still filled with people, but they were different now. Blank faces passed him without a second glance. Not a single smile, not a single word of kindness exchanged. The world was still, disconnected. People moved like machines, their minds and hearts shut off from the world around them. It wasn't just the people. The air itself felt colder, as though the warmth of hope and connection had been stripped away. Superman's heart ached as he realized the true scope of Elion's influence. It wasn't just a matter of changing the way people behaved. It was about removing their very ability to feel. Elion had succeeded in creating a city where kindness no longer existed. How do I fight this? Superman thought desperately. He had always believed that the world could be saved, that even the most lost souls could be redeemed through kindness and compassion. But now, the very foundation of that belief was being torn apart. It wasn't long before Superman was confronted by the effects of Elion's influence on an even more personal level. He landed at a nearby coffee shop, where an elderly woman stood behind the counter, wiping it down. Her eyes were glazed over, her movements mechanical, as if the joy and energy that had once defined her had been drained away. "Excuse me," Superman said gently, his voice soft but urgent. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up at him, but there was no recognition in her eyes. She simply blinked and nodded absently. "I'm fine," she murmured, her voice flat. "Just fine." Superman's heart sank as he realized what had happened. This wasn't just a city of disconnected people. It was a world where even the very essence of who they were had been erased. He looked out the window and saw the streets stretching out, empty of anything that felt human. He thought of his parents, of Martha and Jonathan Kent, who had always taught him the value of kindness and empathy. He thought of Lois and the many moments of joy they had shared. He thought of the countless people he had saved throughout his life, all of them with their own stories, their own dreams, their own humanity. But now, it seemed like all of that was fading into the background. Elion's cold, calculated logic had begun to win over the hearts of the people he cared about. The world was becoming a reflection of Elion's philosophy, a place where human connection was no longer needed. As he stood there in the coffee shop, Superman knew that this was his greatest challenge. Elion's device had silenced the very thing that made people human, their emotions, and for the first time, Superman felt utterly powerless. Superman stood at the edge of the city, watching as the once vibrant metropolis now resembled a ghost town. Every corner he looked, every face he saw, seemed to be completely devoid of the warmth and connection that had once been so abundant. The world had become a machine, its inhabitants walking without purpose, and he, the last hope, felt helpless. He had never faced anything like this before, an enemy that didn't want to conquer the world, but to change its very nature. Elion's influence was powerful, not through brute force, but through the subtle manipulation of humanity's core. His message had spread far and wide, and now the people of Metropolis were shadows of their former selves, moving without feeling, living without purpose. Superman's mind raced. How could I possibly fight this? He had always believed that kindness was the key to making the world a better place, that love, empathy, and compassion were the true powers that could change lives. But Elion had shown him the opposite, the idea that emotions only led to weakness. The thought made Superman's heart ache. The silence in the streets around him was unbearable, the emptiness so palpable that it almost felt as if the city itself had given up. People walked past him without a second glance, their eyes vacant, locked into the cold apathy Elion had promised to bring. His strength, his speed, his ability to fly, all of it was meaningless here. Elion had taken away the one thing Superman couldn't fight with: human connection. He needed to act. But he knew this battle couldn't be won through force. He had to find a way to reach the people, to restore what Elion had stolen from them, their ability to feel, to care, to love. But how? Superman flew to the Fortress of Solitude, desperate for guidance. As he entered the cold, crystalline walls of his sanctuary, He stood before the hologram of Jor-El, his Kryptonian father. The familiar blue glow of the hologram flickered to life, and Jor-El's wise voice echoed through the vast chamber. "Kal-El," Jor-El's voice said softly. "I see the storm within you. You face an enemy unlike any you have encountered before. Elyon does not wield a weapon of strength, but a weapon of the mind. He seeks to turn humanity into something they were never meant to be. Emotionless, calculating, devoid of compassion. This is not a battle of brawn, but a battle for the soul of humanity." Superman clenched his fists, the weight of his father's words sinking deep within him. He felt the loss of humanity's warmth, the very thing that had drawn him to Earth. Could he save them? Was it even possible to undo the damage Elyon had done? "You have always believed in humanity, Kal-El. You have shown them what true strength is, through kindness, through compassion, and through hope. These are not weaknesses. They are the very essence of what makes us human. To defeat Elyon, you must remind the people of who they are, of what they are capable of. You must be the beacon of light they have forgotten." With those words, Superman's resolve solidified. He wasn't going to give up. Elyon might have the power to suppress emotions, to make the world cold and indifferent, but Superman knew that no matter how deep the darkness, there was always a glimmer of light waiting to shine through. The next morning, Superman descended once again into the heart of Metropolis. He flew above the city, watching as people moved like drones, their eyes fixed on the ground. He could feel the absence of life in the air, the lack of hope that had once fueled the energy of the city. But today, he wouldn't give up. Today, he would remind them what they had lost. Superman landed in a small park where a young girl sat on a swing, gently rocking back and forth. She was alone, her face pale and expressionless. Superman approached her carefully, kneeling down so they were eye level. "Hey there," he said gently. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't respond, her gaze fixed forward, her eyes lifeless. Superman's heart ached. He'd seen so much in his life, but nothing like this. Nothing that made him feel so powerless. But he wasn't giving up. Not today. "I know it's hard," Superman said softly. "It feels like the world is falling apart. But I want you to remember something. You're not alone. We're all connected. And it's those connections, the kindness and love we share with one another, that make us strong. That's what makes us human. You don't have to be afraid. The world can heal. But only if we all work together." The girl looked at him then, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, there was a flicker of something there. A spark. It was fleeting, but it was enough. Suddenly, the sound of a nearby vendor's cart breaking down caught their attention. Superman rushed to help, lifting the heavy cart with ease and fixing it so the vendor could continue. The act was small, but it was a reminder of the world they could have if they fought for it. One simple act of kindness at a time. Superman didn't stop there. He visited local schools, helped rebuild homes, restored broken benches in parks. Each small act of kindness, no matter how simple, began to have an effect. People started to notice. They looked at one another again, smiled, helped one another, and slowly, the energy in Metropolis began to shift. Even as Elyon's device pulsed through the city, Superman's acts of kindness slowly began to counteract it. The device had suppressed emotions, but it couldn't erase them completely. People began to remember what it felt like to laugh, to feel compassion, to help one another. It wasn't easy. It wasn't instant. But Superman knew that if humanity was to be saved, it had to come from within. As the city's pulse began to shift, Elyon watched from his fortress, fury in his eyes. He had underestimated the power of human connection, of kindness. "I will not be defeated," Elyon snarled, slamming his fist onto the control panel. "I will rid this world of its weaknesses once and for all." But Superman wasn't done. He would not let Elyon's cold logic win. He had seen the power of kindness with his own eyes, and that was a power Elyon could never comprehend. Ending and lesson. Superman didn't fight Elion with fists or laser vision. He didn't need to. The greatest battle was always fought within the heart. As Elion's influence slowly faded from Metropolis, the people regained their sense of purpose. The city was once again alive with connection, with love, and with hope. Superman had shown them the greatest strength of all, the strength to care. In the end, Elion's cold, emotionless logic was defeated not by the force of Superman's powers, but by the power of human kindness. The city had learned an important lesson. The true power of humanity lies not in what we can do alone, but in what we can do together.